you could bash a thing against a brick wall and it'll be fine.
Right.
Over and over again. They were made. They were kind of made. They're made to make. I think with headphones, one of the most confusing things, let's say when you're going to order a brand new headphone, is what connector do I get on the cable? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the connector that plugs into whatever you're plugging this headphone into.
That one.
Yeah, like one of these, like a headphone amp or portable player or whatever. And the crazy thing is that for headphones, what you see behind us was pretty much your choices. I mean, look at all the freaking options. It's like, that's confusing as hell to have 5 different connectors.
And there are some outliers past that, but
that really have gone away over time.
It actually got a little narrower than it used to be, so this is better.
Yeah.
But there's a few reasons why you might pick one over the other, and that's the purpose of this video. It sort of depends on your use case, the headphone, what you're plugging it into. It's not to say that one's better than the other, but it does depend on what's available on your amp, what's available for your headphone, and what you're trying to do with it. Pretty straightforward, though. We could talk about the reasons why you might pick one over another. We'll start out left to right here, I guess. The 2.5 millimeter there, that's a balanced connector that was commonly used by Astle and Kern on their portables. And we're starting to see it
on their older portables.
Yeah,
they've actually discontinued that connector.
It's getting phased out on most everything, and mostly just probably because of the size, how small and fragile it is. That connector is very small and quite fragile. So
it's also very difficult to put any kind of real wire in it. It's such a tiny connector that you can't solder a lot of conductor in there without having real issues.
You're big like difficult. Braided 8 conductor cables. It
won't work. They won't. No one will even make it because you can't fit that much wire in it. So but it was something they did, I guess, to keep
the portable size.
Yeah, because these, I guess people should understand it. When you have a connector like this, the opposite end is a jack.
Right.
And the jack has a body that has to fit inside the device, whatever, a portable device or whatever.
And
so
it's obviously bigger than the connector
It's
itself.
way bigger. It tends to be, So you see the connector, that's the hole in it, but the jack's like 2-3 times the dimension of that. And so, on some portables, you can't even fit some of the bigger connectors. It just doesn't work. So that's why you don't see them.
Well, that's why they started out with that connector. They figured, well, it's balanced, it's small, we could fit it in our stuff. And that's true. But that sticks out of the device. So you could whack on that thing and you could break it off inside the device or things like that. You could damage it pretty easily. It's very hard to protect it. So that's getting phased out for good reason. And then we have the classic 3.5 millimeter. That's on pretty much everything. That's
been around forever.
An old device that's not hi-fi, high-end or whatever. It's got a 3.5 millimeter on it. Your computer, your laptop, your older phones and things like that.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with the connector.
Everything.
But
they still putting it on the new laptops? Did they put that back?
Some of them.
Yeah, 3.5. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that you'd be using that today.
It's possible.
On a higher, probably not on our headphones, but on the...
Well, you might.
Typical.
If you're plugging into like a computer, a PC tower for gaming or something like that.
Yeah.
You might use that.
It is doable.
Unfortunately, it is the connector that's on pretty much every normal thing.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's pretty sturdy. It works. It's not balanced.
Well, the thing to know about that one is when you see a 3.5 millimeter, it usually also signifies that the device you're plugging into is pretty low power.
Usually.
It's not going to have a lot of juice, not a lot of gain, so it's it's relegated to usually the lower end of headphones that are higher efficiency. They don't need an amplifier. So when you see, like, normally we don't see people ordering Abyss headphones with a 3.5.
Sometimes.
Simply because most stuff nowadays doesn't have enough power, and they're going to go to one of the other connectors. And even if we see someone order 3.5, we'll question and go, well, what are you plugging this into? Because, we got to make sure they have enough power there or gain available.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, compatibility is there, obviously, but for our headphones in particular, not always the best choice.
Yeah, usually you're going to want an amplifier, and most amplifiers don't run that connector, but it's still around. Like, I know there's some companies that make higher power USB dongles that run that connector.
Right, yeah.
You might have a watt available or something like that. But so I think AudioQuest makes some dongles that do pretty good. They're not that high power, but
I think they make higher power ones now,
But my guess is they're converting to 4.4 millimeter, which we will get to.
Well, next.
Yes. So next we have the 4.4 millimeter. somewhat of a newer connector, and it's kind of turning into a standard for balanced.
They call it a Pentacon. Pentacon, I guess, is the original name by, was it Sony?
Sony.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Kleenex situation, I believe.
Yeah.
Like that's the brand name.
Sony
but
called
it's actually 4.4 millimeter.
Sony developed the connector, and then they decided to share it. They didn't license it. They didn't require any fees to use it. They said everyone could use it. And it technically is a fairly superior connector in terms of it's a good size. It's small enough to be used in portable. It's large enough to actually put kind of just about any wire you want to it without having a big. It's easy to solder to. It's got space in the body of it. It's got a lot of.
It's balanced.
It's good. It's a good overall connector for headphones.
It's fantastic for pretty much everything. You don't see it on every amp though, so that's the trouble. It's mostly on more higher end portables and smaller form factor amps. You see it more now than ever, but it's maybe on 30 to 50% of amps, depending on the price point you're looking at.
Mostly portable.
Yeah.
And the desktops, like we're starting to see it too. Like the 11 Audio Broadway balance is full balance, so it runs that 4.4 and a 4-pin, which both are balanced. It requires a balanced connector, so we'll get to that 4-pin next. But yeah, when you see amps that have balanced out. You know what I think it is that the deal is that like a lot of people tend maybe to start with portable with a 4.4 millimeter, right? And then ultimately they want to upgrade to a desktop or get a desktop too for when they're home. And so you tend to only have one connector on your headphone cable. So it kind of sucks to have to get another cable to go to a desktop. So you're seeing desktops that do have 4.4 millimeter so that someone with a portable connector can just come home and plug in.
But that is the nice thing about the 4.4 is that you can just get an adapter to go to 4-pin.
To any other balanced, right?
So then just
plugs into people make those big 4-pin XLRs with a 4.4 in the back. They're pretty small. You plug it right in. So it isn't like this big complex adapter. It's pretty compact.
It's pretty much the size of the connector, the XLR connector.
And the plug is small enough, but also big enough that it's probably not going to break. It's durable. You could plug it in and unplug it a bunch. It's robust. You could accidentally bump into the thing. It's probably not going to break. So it's a great connector all around.
Yeah, thank you, Sony.
Yeah, it's nice because we use the adapter here, and since the amp for our test setup is older and doesn't have a 4.4 millimeter on it, plug the adapter in to test the cable.
Yep.
Easy.
Moving on. 4-pin XLR, so the full size version of the big XLR that you see a lot in high end but never see anywhere else. And that's sort of a vaguely newer standard as well. You see that on almost everything that's balanced and desktop.
Yeah, not so many years ago, like 4-pin was kind of like not used.
Yeah, you never saw that.
I mean, it was there on desktops. But
it started out as some things had dual 3-pin.
Yeah.
And then everybody realized, well, we can condense that into one connector.
Yeah.
Right. Electrically, it's great. Very, very durable, robust, easy to wire. You could get a good strain leaf in there, so the cable's durable and robust generally. All around great. It's just kind of big and heavy, the connector physically. So you're not going to see it on portable so much.
Well, it does exist.
Some people have it, yeah. But on desktop, where it doesn't really matter, great option, works great. That would be our recommended go-to for pretty much everyone running a desktop setup with a high-end headphone. Great compatibility, and it looks to be continuing to improve because most people are putting that on their amp as long as it's balanced or they put a means in there to be able to connect a balanced connector like that.
You're seeing almost all desktops nowadays. The 4-pin XLR has kind of been it's mostly universal nowadays on any tabletop amplifier, and again, because it's balanced, it has 4 pins, so it has 2 for left channel, 2 for right. It's fully balanced. You can adapt that down or backwards to a portable connector. So you can buy an adapter to go from that to a 4.4 or even a 2.5.
I wouldn't recommend that.
But because the 4-pin connector is kind of heavy, it's usually not a great idea to drop it down to a 2.5 because then you got this little pin at the other end.
Yeah,
but
a lot of leverage on it.
Yeah, well, what you want when you take a big connector and drop it to a little one, you should be using a flexible adapter. Yeah. Someone will physically make the cable. It's short. It's this long, and it has a jack on one end for the big connector, and then the little plug on the other. So basically, when you dumb down a big connector to little, you want flexibility. Mm-hmm. You don't really want it to.
Yeah.
You don't
It'd be pretty easy to bang into that.
That much leverage on a little pin. So you got to think about that. So never go to a very small connector. never adapt down to a very small connector with a solid adapter. You want some flex.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do we got left?
Quarter inch, the classic.
OG of all
Oh,
OGs.
That's been around with tube amps for 100 years.
and
forever.
like receivers.
Yeah.
The old school
Forever.
receivers
Longer
from
than
the
the 3.5
70s.
millimeter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
It's on
classic as it gets.
everything.
I mean, guitars run them, right?
Yeah,
Guitar
right.
amps. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pro stuff all runs it, right?
You know how many quarter-inch connectors they've probably sold over the years?
Lots.
It's an ancient connector, and for a very, very, very long time, it was the only one. It was the standard. It was the go-to. It's fine. They work. They're not great, but they're not bad.
They're very robust.
Very
In
robust.
terms of build quality. The
Yeah.
body is like solid metal. It's you could bash a thing against a brick wall and it'll be fine.
Right.
Over and over again. They were kind of
Yeah.
made. They're made to
Yeah.
make
Pro
cables out
use,
of for
yeah.
the road. Yeah, for the guys on the road. The musicians to take.
Yep.
Used on stages everywhere. They were the shit.
You still see them used.
yeah. Oh,
Very
yeah.
common.
Yeah.
So it works, of course. And for headphone use, you see it a lot less now. Most
Yeah.
people are walking away from it, but it's still on some amps, especially
amps.
single-ended
Tube amps.
tube amps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you don't need balanced, and it works fine, right?
Right.
And also you see it on even like integrated receivers, like stuff that's made
Right.
for home theater or two-channel use, where they just happen to throw a jack on the front so that it wasn't dedicated for headphone use,
Right.
but they got a jack. It's almost always quarter-inch.
Because it's universal.
And there's some higher-end guys too, like, the guys like the Pioneer that are bringing back, they're doing $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 integrated amps, expensive amps. Denon, I think, has that. And I think they all tend to run this classic. We call it a quarter-inch connector in the States. Of course, inches aren't used for measurement elsewhere. Technically, it was called 6.35 millimeter. I don't know why the hell they'd carry it out to the 100th place on a decimal. But that was the equivalent of a quarter was 6.35 millimeter. We've slowly just said, let's drop the 5 and call it a 6.3 and call it a day. And I think everyone's
that's enough
kinda
precision.
gone there now. Yeah, we don't need more digits.
You can tell by looking at it what
Yeah,
it
right.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing close to it. It's
Right.
like
But it's a big 3-conductor connector. It's not balanced, single-ended only, so it's got a common ground for left, right. And anyway, that's your option. So when you're choosing a plug for your headphone, you kind of really got to know what you're plugging it into, because that's what you're picking. What the device you're going to connect your headphone, what's it got? And then I would pick the most robust of these that fits it.
Pretty much.
Which is probably going to be the 4.4 millimeter nowadays for most people.
Yeah, most people 4.4 or the 4-pin XLR. Occasionally, you might get some 3.5, some quarter inches. Really depends on what you're doing. If you're only doing gaming, maybe the 3.5 millimeter.
On the lower end of things, I think 3.5 is probably quite common. I mean,
Still
in a
is,
few $100 category,
It's on everything.
That's a stock connector
Yeah,
for the
especially lower cost
because they
stuff.
know these guys. They know at that price point, you're just plugging in anything that's got that
laptop,
connector.
desktop,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, you're not really using an amp.
Yeah.
But for high-end headphones, it's not the best connector.
But yeah, as we've saw, depending on the headphone, you tend to see different connectors used. So like Diana, right now, it's pretty much all 4.4 and then 4-pin. And then 1266 is like pretty much all 4-pin.
All 4-pin, yeah. Couple people, there is one more option that we don't show here, which is a dual 3-pin.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really see that too often.
Yeah.
Woo Audio has an amplifier called the WA234, I think it was, and it's 2 amps.
Right.
Amplifiers, I should say. I said amplifier. So you have a left amp and a right amp. So you needed a left plug and a right plug.
Right.
So you needed 2 separate plugs to connect your headphone.
It's a unique use case.
And that
though.
used
Yeah.
3-pin XLR, which looks like that 4-pin, but it's only got 3 pins.
Right.
And it's a balance connector. That's what they use for balance connections, a 3-pin male. But yeah, you'll see that there are some amplifiers too on the upper end. The Sim Audio Moon, the Moon 430A had dual 3s.
And a 4-pin.
The 11 Audio, the Formula S, has dual 3s.
Mm-hmm.
So some amps allow that. And some people like that. I mean, they just like to have completely separate cables to the amp. It's got a cool factor to it for us old
Kind
guys.
of, yeah. It doesn't really do anything appreciably over the 4-pin.
Yeah.
So you don't really see
It's
it
the
much.
same.
Yeah, these
Internally,
days,
it's
I'd like to just
connected.
plug in the one 4-pin.
Yeah.
That's my
Right.
standard go-to.
Agreed.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a lot less weight to deal with.
That too.
And the other thing is too, like I've seen some people that have classic dual threes. They've bought it a couple years ago, 3 years
Right.
ago for a certain amp. And now they changed amps and it doesn't have dual. It's got 4 pins. So now they got to run a Y adapter
Right.
from dual 3 female XLR. It gets real chunky
does.
when you try to take 2 XLRs, connect them to another 2 XLRs down to 1 XLR. That's like a half a pound of XLR sitting there at the amp.
Yeah.
So bottom line is that we don't recommend getting a dual 3 unless you've got an amplifier that you're never going to use anything else with, and that's what you want. And it's cool. It's fine by that. So I think that's about it with connectors. So
For the most part.
thank God no one's come up with any new ones lately because we don't need it.
It seems to be improving. People are kind of narrowing it down.
Yeah.
We finally got rid of the RSA connector, among other weird standards that were barely used.
Like dual 1/4-inch jacks.
Oh yeah.
That was like kind of
I
a
think
thing.
some people use dual 3-pin 2.5s and dual 3.5s and stuff like that. There was early days where people were doing balance in weird ways.
Yeah, right.
But that's all gone. We got the 4.4 and the 4-pin XLR that are widely used, which is great. Probably should do like a connector tier list video too.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh. If there's a connector we didn't mention, let us know because
Yeah.
But I think pretty much the quarter's been around forever.
Yeah. If there was something that someone wanted, we'd probably hear about it.
Like what's that white pair I got? Those AKGs from like the 70s or whatever. They got 1/4 inch.
Quarter inch.
Almost everything had 1/4 inch in the 70s because the receivers. Those back then you had
That
receivers.
was like your option. Yeah.
Everyone had a receiver. It was like, and receivers back then put out maybe a watt or two. Like this stuff was back in the day. You had highly efficient speakers, and so they would just throw a 1/4 inch jack on the front. And they would run a 50 tip. The typical norm would be to run a 50 ohm resistor in series with the jack. So it would be tied right to the outputs. The speaker outputs of the receiver would go through 50 ohm resistor on left right channel to drop so you couldn't short. There was no way to short out that jack and blow up your amplifier of your receiver. So they would put 50 ohms in series. So almost all the older receivers have automatically 50 ohms in series with your headphone, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So the volume would always be way lower at the jack on the front than it would at the speaker out.
Take that resistor out if you want to really be daring.
Yeah, right. That's what you really needed to do because nowadays that's like a one-way receiver is kind of a joke. I don't even know what you'd run with that. Not
Horns?
much. Yeah, not much. Yeah, like get an adapter, hook your headphone right to the back of that bad boy, right to the speaker outs.
There you go.
I didn't say that. On that note, everyone, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up and please subscribe because we always got good stuff coming. Take care.